Okay, let's get into this. Today's deep dive, it's looking at some pretty intense, definitely controversial source material. We're examining parts of a piece called The Unseen Truth, Zionism's Grip on America.
Right. And what's really striking here is how this specific source builds its arguments at a very particular viewpoint, obviously, and it strings together various historical moments to back up its central thesis.
Exactly. So our job today, like always, is to pull out the core claims, the arguments made in this source. We want you to understand its perspective, how it tells its story.
Yeah, we're not here to say if it's right or wrong or to fact check it against other histories. It's purely about understanding this narrative. What does this specific piece allege? How does it connect the dots, so to speak?
So how does it start? Well, the source kicks off with a pretty bold statement. It claims America, even though it's a Christian majority nation, is gripped by a force that defies its faith, its history, its soul. And it names that force Zionism.
It gets specific quickly. It says a tiny group less than 2% of the population holds the reins, calls them a shadow elite, and the tools they supposedly use, money, power, fear. Pretty dramatic language.
Very. So, okay, if you make a claim like that, how do you try and, show it? Where does the source go first?
Immediately, it pivots to history. Specifically, the USS Liberty incident, June 8th, 1967. This is a pattern we see in the source: make a big claim, then point to a specific event as kind of Exhibit A.
Right. The Liberty, it describes it as a U.S. Navy ship clearly marked in international waters.
Yeah.
And then attacked by Israeli jets and torpedo boats. The source is blunt. 34 American sailors slaughtered, 171 wounded.
And the source strongly refutes Israel's explanation. Israel said, "We thought it was an Egyptian ship," but the source calls that a lie so blatant it insults the dead, pointing to the ship's large, clear American flag.
And the key point for this source's argument is what happened next, or rather, what didn't happen. America did nothing. That's the quote. No revenge, no justice.
Exactly. The source presents this inaction by the mightiest military on earth as proof. Proof of some hidden influence, some power forcing the U.S. to stay silent.
And it argues this wasn't just a one-off. It broadens the scope. It talks about funding. Every year, the U.S. funnels billions to Israel. It even throws out a figure, $4 billion a month, some say, though it attributes that to some.
And then poses the question directly. What hold do they have over a country that bows to no one else? So it's moving from that specific tragic event, the Liberty, to this ongoing financial relationship, trying to build a case for continuous powerful influence.
Okay, so that's the setup. Where does the narrative take us next?
It jumps back a few years, actually, to November 22nd, 1963, Dallas, Texas.
Ah, the Kennedy assassination.
Yes, and the source paints JFK as unique, the only president who dared to stand tall. Why? Because according to this text, he questioned Israel's secret nuclear ambitions at Dimona.
So the source claims Kennedy was pushing back, demanding inspections, trying for peace, refused to let Zionists dictate America's path.
Precisely. And then it makes the connection very starkly. It juxtaposes that stance with the assassination. It mentions the bullet, the graphic image of his brains splattered across that open-top limousine. It's clearly implying cause and effect.
Even though the official finding was Lee Harvey Oswald, a lone gunman.
Right. The source acknowledges that, but urges digging deeper. It talks about shadows moving. It hints quite strongly at Mossad's hand, Israel's intelligence agency, possibly pulling strings with the CIA.
Does it offer proof?
It actually asks itself that question. No proof. And then immediately points to supposedly declassified JFK files released in 2025, which seems chronologically odd, but that's what the source states: files that hint at secrets still buried. It's using suggestion, implication, pointing towards future potential revelations.
And it tries to bolster this connection further, right, by looking at what happened after Kennedy's death.
Yes, it claims Kennedy's death was followed by a flood of arms to Israel under Lyndon Johnson, his successor, and again poses a rhetorical question. Coincidence, or a deal sealed in blood? It's weaving these events into its larger conspiracy narrative.
Wow. And it doesn't stop with JFK, does it? The source mentions another alleged pattern of deaths.
No, it keeps going. It brings up Indian nuclear scientists, claims they were working to make their nation a powerhouse, and then asserts they started dropping like flies through mysterious deaths, unexplained accidents.
And the alleged reason.
Again, tying it back to the central theme. The source says, rumors swirl of Mossad and CIA tag teaming to keep India down. Because in this view, a nuclear India threatens the Zionist grip on global power. It connects seemingly disparate events, JFK, Indian scientists, back to this single alleged hidden hand.
Okay, so from the 60s through these alleged incidents with India, the source then jumps forward significantly in time.
It does, right into the 21st century, September 11, 2001.
9/11, obviously a massive, globally transformative event. How does the source incorporate this?
Well, it acknowledges the main events, Twin Towers falling, the Pentagon hit, but then it zooms in on a very specific controversial detail. It highlights a story about a group of Israelis seen dancing, cheering as the towers fall from a location in New Jersey.
I remember hearing about that report at the time. How does the source present it?
It states, police arrest them, hold them for 71 days, and then crucially, an order comes from on high. It speculates a Zionist in the chain of command, some say, and they're released, whisked back to Israel.
And the implication the source wants you to draw.
It asks, why? What did they know? It doesn't directly accuse them of involvement in the attacks themselves, but strongly implies foreknowledge or something suspicious about their release. It uses questions to plant doubt.
And this is part of a larger claim the source makes about 9/11 itself, right?
Absolutely. It explicitly states the conspiracy runs deep. It asserts 9/11 was a Zionist plot to drag America into endless wars against Islam. It names the resulting wars, Iraq, Afghanistan.
And points to the outcome, like the fact that no weapons of mass destruction found in Iraq.
Yes, and it even quotes soldiers supposedly saying there was nothing there, trying to frame the wars as based on deception, serving this alleged hidden agenda.
It even brings in a quote attributed to Putin.
It does. It claims Putin himself hinted at it, referring to America's propaganda machine, supposedly steered by Zionists who framed Islam as the enemy. The source essentially poses 9/11 as the catalyst, the spark they needed to reshape the world, according to this alleged Zionist plan.
So it's woven together, the Liberty, JFK, these alleged scientist deaths, and now 9/11 and the subsequent wars.
Yeah.
What's the next thread it pulls on?
It shifts focus slightly to what it calls the gut punch. It tackles the relationship between Zionism, as it defines it, and Christianity in America.
How does it frame that?
It emphasizes America as a Christian nation, and it presents a seeming contradiction. Despite, historical tensions sometimes between Judaism and Christianity, it claims Zionists hold sway over a land that prays to the cross.
And how does the source claim this influence is maintained?
Through, quote, fear, manipulation, and a narrative that paints Israel as the eternal victim. That's the mechanism alleged by the source.
It argues that American Christians have been sort of co-opted.
That's the thrust of it. The source claims they've convinced Christians to see Israel as God's chosen, using religious sentiment. While at the same time, it argues American interests are being undermined, soldiers die for foreign wars, while billions vanish into Israel's coffers, while the USS Liberty's ghosts scream for justice. It juxtaposes these images very deliberately.
And it uses the Iraq War again here.
As a prime example, it repeats the claim it was built on lies, caused immense suffering, millions dead, families shattered, and then makes the explicit link. American troops, Christian boys sent to die for a Zionist agenda. It directly connects the soldiers' faith and sacrifice to the alleged hidden motive.
And it ends that section with a pretty strong claim. Still, no one asks why.
Yes, reinforcing the idea of a kind of willful blindness or suppressed questioning within the U.S.
Which leads into its conclusion for that part, a direct address.
A very direct call to action, or at least to awareness. It tells America to wake up, stating, your system isn't yours. Your soldiers' blood stains foreign soil for a cause you don't understand. It's a powerful, alarming conclusion to that section.
Okay, so we've walked through the main arguments, the key historical moments as presented in this specific source, the unseen truth, Zionism's grip on America.
Yeah, we've traced how it constructs this really sweeping narrative. It connects the USS Liberty, JFK's assassination, these claims about Indian scientists, 9/11, the Iraq War, all presented as evidence for one single overarching claim, a hidden Zionist control over the United States.
And just to reiterate, our aim here was simply to unpack that specific narrative, to show you what this source claims and how it makes its case by linking these disparate events.
Exactly. It's about understanding the source itself, its rhetoric, its structure, especially when dealing with material that makes such significant and controversial assertions. It's important to see how the argument is built.
We haven't been validating these claims or trying to debunk them, just laying out the map of this particular source's perspective for you.
So listening to this breakdown, what strikes you about the way this source weaves its story? How does it use historical events, suggestion, and emotional appeals to create this picture of hidden control?
What does examining a source like this tell us about how narratives, especially controversial ones, are constructed and presented to persuade an audience? Something to think about.
Definitely food for thought.
That's our deep dive for today. Hopefully, this gives you a much clearer understanding of this specific piece of writing and how these kinds of narratives function. Until next time, stay curious and keep diving deep.